Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of my Awesomatics A800 build tips. Today we're going to be going through the Awesomatics G2DB gear diff. Here's what they look like here, assembled. So this diff's a bit different in the fact that we don't have a molded pulley into one half of the diff. We've got two alloy diff halves here, which basically screw together, and then we've got a separate pulley that goes on later. So yeah, we'll get started assembling this. Pretty much the first thing you need to do is pop your gears out of their parts tree here. It's pretty straightforward doing that. You don't need to remove any extra material. You don't need to sand the gears. You don't need to cut anything off them. They're good to go straight away. So just prepare them. Now we're going to firstly get your O-rings and slide them into the halves of the diff. So we're going to start working with this half first. This half is the half that we fill with oil. This half is the part we bleed with. So just put that to the side for now. We're going to focus on just this one half and getting that right. So go ahead and put some oil on our O-ring here. As with any O-ring, it's super important to keep all of this lubricated really well. Alright, so don't be shy on your oil. So we're going to slide this in here, like that. Alright, so that's not fully seated. We actually need to seat that properly. So what you can do to seat that is I like to use, it's about a 4mm drill bit, the other end of a drill bit. And it actually works perfectly just to seat that O-ring down in there. So a bit difficult to see, I know, but our O-ring's now nice and pressed down in there. It's a really tight fit, so actually now getting our outdrive through can be quite difficult. It's just something you have to take your time with. And yeah, don't rush it and you'll be fine. So we'll assemble the start of the outdrive. So we've got our big washer first, and then our bearing. The bearing I like to face the balls to the inside, just so they can't get any dirt or anything. So that's now sealed off. Alright, so pretty much we can push that through. I like to also just put a little bit of lubrication on the very tip here. Just because when you're pushing that through the O-ring, a little bit of that just makes it a lot easier. No dirty jokes, please. Alright. So then we just press that through. Sometimes it can take a little bit of force. There we go, we're in. Alright, so now that's through. I might just grab a rag so that we can wash off any excess. Here we go. So just get any excess grease that's on out of there. Alright, so we want to be assembling this half. We've got in this diff two P46 foams. Now these foams, they are basically all that holds the oil in, so they're super important. This is on the latest G2DB diffs. So we're going to lock this side, we're going to seal off this side, because we're going to fill this side with oil. We're going to bleed from the other side, so we want to put the P46 in before we put all our outdrive and stuff on. So while you've got your diff here, get your foams, insert it into that half. You need to grab a 1.5mm driver. You can use anything thin, but I find a 1.5 works really well. Alright, and just push that in like that till it's all the way to the end. And now you can actually see it in here. You can see your P46 blue foam. Alright, now we're going to chuck our bearings on. Don't forget to put your bearings on, because they can't be added after you put your outdrive. Alright, there's our outdrive there. Now we just slide our pin in. It's a little bit tedious because these pins are absolutely tiny. But if you locate it right, just work your way around, you should be able to slide it in. So now we're slid in. We've just got to push the pin so it's perfectly centrally located, like so. Alright, now we need to put an O-ring on, and the O-rings here are what holds those diff pins in. So I like to put it over a wheel nut driver, like that. This is just an easy way of getting it on rather than fiddling around. Wheel nut driver, butt it up, nice and tight, and push it over, like so, and your O-ring's on. So just slowly work your way to the edge. Sometimes it can creep back towards the bearing. So what we want to do is we want to make sure the O-ring's sealing off the pin. So just grab like a knife or something thin and make sure your O-ring is pressed nicely against the diff cup so it's sealing and stopping the pin from coming out. Alright, so that half of the diff's pretty much done. You can insert your gear like that. And we're good. It's nice and free. Just make sure if this part's binding, you might want to rebuild this or put more grease. Because yeah, you want it to be nice and smooth. You also want to, you can hear the bearing in there, ball racing it all. So yeah, there's no slop. Everything's really nice. Alright, so now we can fill this part with oil. So So I like to use the Muchmore diff oil here. I find it's really good, it's really consistent. I use between 3,000 to 10,000. 10,000 for modified, really high traction, hot temperatures. And then use, say, on the opposite end, we've got for spec classes, you want to be working between the 3 to 5,000 generally. Usually for lower grip tracks, you'll go less, 3 to 5. For higher grip tracks, you'll go 8 to 10 for mods. So yeah, for all the spec classes, I'd keep it between 3 to 8. Definitely wouldn't go more than 8, maybe on super high grip, but that's about it. For modified, you want to go between probably 5 to 10. You don't usually need to go to 3. You can usually get away with a 5k, and 10 obviously for super high traction conditions. All right, so I'll go ahead and fill it just with 5,000 because that's a really nice starting point, pretty much for any class. For spec classes, it might be too much, especially for mod, it's great. So we want to fill this up to within about 3 mil of the top. So because we're putting oil in the middle, it takes a while to actually disperse and fill up the diff. So just build up on it slowly, because you don't want to be putting, it is a little bit deceptive when you put it in firstly, because it's not around the edges and it doesn't fill up. So it looks like it's less full than it actually is. So just wait until it spreads out. And obviously there's going to be air bubbles in there too, so we just need to wait until all the air bubbles are gone. So that looks actually about perfect, so about 3 mil from the top. I'll just put a little bit in. It's good to put a little bit extra rather than not enough, because we're just going to be bleeding it out the other side anyway, and you definitely don't want the diff to be underfilled, because that can lead to a pretty inconsistent diff. So we'll just put this aside and let it bleed for now. You just wait till all the air bubbles are gone. Actually just good to give this outdrive a little bit of a move the oil around, get everything seated, just so there's going to be no trapped air bubbles in there. Alright, so we can work on the other half now. Pretty much exactly the same deal. We're going to start by putting the O-ring in, plenty of oil. Alright, put it in there. We'll just grab our drill bit again to seat our O-ring. Push down. Alright, we're in. So now we've got to slide our outdrive through and build our outdrive. So big shim, little bearing with the balls onto the inside and the cage to the outside. Make sure that sits on square and is pushed down. A little bit of grease just on the end to help us all slide through. Alright, so we should be good. Just line it up. Sometimes it can be a bit tight, just because of how tight a fit the O-ring is. But if you just push, oh, looks like our O-ring's gone a little bit cocked. So we'll just put that back in again. The O-ring can quite easily shift to the side or something, just because of how tight it is. And if you're putting the outdrive in on even the tiniest of angles. So just seat that back inside. That's back in now. We'll have another crack. Just make sure everything's back and seated properly, because your bearing can fall off and then it can jam sideways. Let's get that in the middle. Alright, we're through. It looks like that the bearing is on a slight angle, so what you can do is push around here. That then seats our bearing square again. We can push through, and there we go. Now the diff out drives all the way through. So honestly, that process can take a little bit of time. It's worth, getting it right. You want the O-ring sitting in properly. The hardest part probably is pushing the outdrive through the O-ring, because sometimes if it's not perfectly square, the O-ring can pop out. Just be careful on how you're doing it. Take your time. Make sure that each half is assembled, and after it's assembled, it's really nice and free. So for this half, we're going to be leaving the P46 foam out for now, because we're actually going to be bleeding through it. So you can move on to putting your main diff gear in. This half we also need to put our big O-ring. That's the main O-ring that seals the whole diff. And it's quite undersized, which is actually great, because it means that we can use it forever, because it's not going to stretch ever bigger than the diff case. Not like a lot of other brands where you've got to replace the diff O-ring pretty much every time you build it. So I pretty much go almost all the way over, and then you can just use a wrench to get those last few. Can be a little bit of a pain. There we go. So we're over, and just seat that down. I've got a little bit of oil on my fingers, which is quite good actually, because it'll just lubricate that O-ring, so that seals properly. Alright, now we're going to build the spider gears. So we need our cross brace, our shims and our spider gears. As per pretty much any other diff, put one spider gear on each, and we're going to need to put one shim on each. So shim, shim. It's a bit tricky to hold everything, but alright, let's sit that down. So we're going to be turning this part upside down to screw to our other diff half. So with the spider gears attached. So one thing I often do is I just put a little bit of oil and just trace it around on here. Just a little bit of oil on here, and that just helps the spider gears to stick to this main gear. So when we turn it upside down, the spider gears aren't going to fall everywhere. And then just seat that in like that. Everything should seat down nicely. Alright, we're good. So we can take this again. You can see there's all the air bubbles are gone from there. Everything's perfect. So now what we need to do, I kind of just try and hold the edge of these gears while I turn it upside down, just to double check that everything's going to be fine. And yeah, just like tip it into here basically, like so. Get it lined up. Alright, now we're just sitting on there, and now you can just go ahead and screw the whole thing together. We're going to be watching for oil coming out of here, because when we fill the diff up full, it's going to bleed. So we keep screwing. Alright, you need a 10mm wrench for this. I'll actually be having a purpose built one pretty soon, but for now I'm just going to use as just a standard 10mm wrench. So just screw this up. And now just to do it up tightly, I'd like to use a rag and just grab it, pull it up all the way. Alright, so I can see there's some oil in the shaft, and so obviously that means it's bled. If you have a lot of oil coming out of here, don't stress. It's when you put your driver down and there's absolutely nothing. I've pretty much filled this perfectly, so there's actually not going to be much excess. I can feel there's a little bit in here, so just put that down, wipe it off with your cloth. More bit of oil coming out. So once you've cleared that out, we can go ahead and put our foam in. Sometimes you have a lot more oil, it just depends. If you fill it, I managed to just get the perfect height so it wasn't going everywhere. But yeah, it can be better to fill it up a little bit more just to be safer than sorry. If it's not coming out, then it can sometimes mean you haven't filled it enough. Just stick the driver down, and almost like a dipstick, you can see, how far up the oil is. And for me, it was about halfway up the shaft. So I just cleaned that out, because when we put the P46 foam in, we don't want oil in the shaft, or else that's going to come out and we're going to think that our diff's leaking when in fact it's just extra oil. Alright, so we can put our P46 foam in and seal everything up. Your 1.5, and basically all you do is push that down into there, all the way to the bottom. Alright, our diff is now sealed. Just make sure that when you're going to put the pin in and everything, just make sure this is pulled out. So you've got to pull this out, or else when you put your out drive on, this will be too far in, you won't be able to get your pin in. So now we put our bearing on, don't forget that. Out drive. Out drive is a bit tight. So again, if that happens and it pushes in, just remember to pull our out drive back in, out again. Alright, we're on. Just grab the pliers. Put our pin through. You can just sit the pin in. Oh. This could be a little bit tedious. Make sure your hole's lined up, sit your pin in. There we go, we're through. So just push your pin so that it lines up perfectly in the center, like so. And lastly, all we've got to do is put our O-ring on to stop the pin falling out. So just, again, over our wheel nut driver. Push it nice and tight onto there and over. And then we're just going to seat it there. See how it's actually fallen towards the bearing, so we just need to get our knife again, turn it and push it back so it's sealing over our pin there. And there we go. If you want to check out my other videos, you can check out online at www.rcmaker.com.au. And if you want to contact me, you can contact me via my Facebook page, facebook.com/rcmaker1. You can also send me an email if you've got any questions. Ryan at rcmaker.com.au. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers.